welcome to Saturday Night at the Movies, the podcast that celebrates classic, cult, and current films and the people that made them, and many other aspects of pop culture. I'm your host, Steve Rubin. Our producer is Ben Shrewsbury, and our signature theme was composed by Greg Leroff. Here it's always Saturday night, and our mission is to chronicle film and pop cultural history one memory at a time. Tonight, we're pleased to have as our guest Emmy Award-winning and DGA Award-winning writer, director, and sometime actor John Herzfeld, who received those accolades for the HBO film Don King only in America, but who also wrote and directed the drama thriller 2 Days in the Valley, which gets a big thumbs up from me and which we'll talk about in a bit. John has a plethora of credits on both the big screen and small screen, some of which we will discuss tonight. Welcome, John.
Thank you. It's good to be here, and thanks for having me.
So I always ask this of our guests, their earliest movie memories. I would like to know if you grew up in a movie-going family.
Yes, I did. We went to the movies all the time. My uncle actually owned a theater, and my father took us to lots of movies, lots of plays. He loved culture. He loved films.
And
He
what what
definitely experienced it.
what town was this in?
West Orange. Well, I was born in Newark, and then I was raised in West Orange, New Jersey. Maplewood first, then West Orange, New Jersey. So I'm a Jersey boy.
And this uncle who owned a movie theater, what was the name of that theater?
Maplewood Theater. It's still there in Maplewood, New Jersey. Great theater, little theater. That's where I saw Magnificent Seven. That's where I saw many of the movies that I love now and still love.
Oh, I know exactly where I saw the Magnificent Seven. I saw it at the stadium on Pico, which has been a temple since 1962. It's funny to be mentioning the Magnificent Seven. I often wonder what it must have been like to watch the dailies without that Elmer Bernstein score. I mean, that Elmer Bernstein score was so much that movie.
It was great. Later I got to work with James Coburn, who told me some great stories of him and McQueen, and so I got some wonderful insights into the Magnificent Seven.
It's funny because they often talk about the rivalry between Yul Brynner and McQueen in that first sequence when they're on the hearse and they're all doing all this kind of business. So much fun. So did you carry over this interest in the movies to school? I noticed that you started your career acting. Were you an acting student?
Yes, I went to University of Miami, uh, um, and I was in the Ring Theater, the drama program, and they didn't do any films per se. They did more plays and theater, but I was, I mean, I went to movies all the time. I barely went to class. I don't even remember any classes I took, honestly, except theater, but I couldn't tell you any of the others. So I love movies all the time.
So
That's
if I ask this a lot too, if you were trapped on a desert island and you only could bring one movie with you to watch till the rest of your life, what movie would that be?
Spartacus.
Ah,
Spartacus, Spartacus. And Spartacus had a profound effect on me. I love Kirk Douglas. I actually had lunch with him and talked about it. When the DGA ran, was it 25 or 35 anniversary of Spartacus at the DGA, I went with Tony Curtis and sat next to Tony Curtis. And I actually did a TV movie where Woody Strode had a role.
oh
And
wow.
I knew, and I actually still have the little book you got when we went to see it in Times Square. They give you that little program, a hardback book with Kirk on the cover and Gene Simmons.
The souvenir book.
And
That
I
was
think
kind of a mainstay in the old roadshow days.
I still have it. I had Kirk autograph it. I had Tony Curtis autograph it, Woody Strode. And I love the movie. I see it all the time. I think it contains one of the single greatest co-starring roles in movie history, and that is Laurence Olivier, whose performance was astounding. I think it's astounding. He holds the whole movie up with Kirk and the rest. And I love the movie. I've seen it 70 times.
On Saturdays, I publish a classic film review on Facebook every week. And this week, I highlighted a MGM film from '53 called The Actress, which starred Gene Simmons. And Gene Simmons, my goodness, how fetching was she in Spartacus?
Marinia, she was phenomenal. And I'll tell you what else. I think it contains one of the single greatest scores of all time. It's not as heralded as it should be by the great Alex North, whose score is phenomenal. I listen to the soundtrack. I listen to it at the gym all the time. It
Um,
inspires, it invigorates me. It just,
oh,
I
me
just,
too, me too. It's on my phone. In fact, I have the Roman march sequence when those centurions, what do they call the cohorts or whatever they're called when they're massing to attack uh, Spartacus's group there. Yeah, that's a great movie. My desert island movie is also a very big passion for me because I've done two documentaries on it. Is the McQueen Coburn film The Great Escape?
I saw The Great Escape last night. I see The Great Escape, I would say every couple of months. It is phenomenal. I mean, to think that you directed Magnificent Seven and then you do Great Escape back to back. And uh, what a career. I mean, to direct those movies back to back is just astounding. Another phenomenal score.
Oh yeah, oh no, absolutely. I was fortunate. I started my research. I first did a book back in the early '80s called Combat Films, American Realism, 1945 to 1970. Even though The Great Escape isn't technically a combat film, I had to include a chapter. So I did a lot of research. I got to Warner's and I spent 2 hours with John Sturgis, and he offered to edit my manuscript. He was so helpful, and I talked to a lot of people. And then when I went to Showtime in '93 on the 30th anniversary, I did a documentary on Return to the Great Escape, and we got Coburn, David McCallum. I got let's see, I got Donald Pleasance. We interviewed him in France. We actually took a crew to Bavaria and we filmed on some of the original locations. It was great. And then I returned to it a few years ago. A French filmmaker contacted me and had taken a crew to the sites and much more in-depth research than we did. And so we did a documentary called, I came up with a title, The Coolest Guy Movie Ever. And we show the way the film is today and or the locations are today compared to the actual locations where they filmed. And it was quite good. And the French filmmaker had actually gotten a German television interview with Steve McQueen on the set, which no one had ever seen. It was just incredible, incredible. You and I could talk about those movies all day long, but let me get to one of your movies because before we get into 2 Days in the Valley, I wanted to put up a movie. I thought this was interesting. Um, yes, here we are. Splendor in the Grass.
Oh my God, you're prepared. You're prepared. Michelle Pfeiffer's introduction to the movies. Michelle,
Exactly. Michelle Pfeiffer has a role in this movie. I found it very interesting, first off the bat, because as a film publicist, one of my first assignments doing feature unit publicity in Florida, by the way, I worked on Porky's 2,
oh
starring,
wow.
amongst others, Cyril O'Reilly. And I mean, this is a remake of a true classic with Natalie Wood and Warren Beatty. That must have presented an interesting challenge for you to take on such material. Was it difficult?
No, it was easy because I didn't want to mess with the original. First of all, it's directed by the greatest director, in my opinion, of all time, Elia Kazan. And you have Warren Beatty, you have Natalie Wood. You have it's just a phenomenal movie. And when they asked me to adapt it, all I could think was, I'm not going to mess this up. I don't want to make radical changes to it. I'm working with a classic. I'm working with a, phenomenal material by a director that I revere, who changed the acting business, certainly. And so it wasn't hard because I wasn't going to try and reinvent the wheel. I just wanted to make sure the wheel went right and it was respectable, and I think it worked out good.
And Melissa Gilbert, of course, was very hot at that time, especially in television. And Cyril, not as well known, but how did they work together? Well,
Yes, I thought it worked really well. Yeah. And they were I think it worked. Boy, that's your stuff. I don't think anyone's ever asked me about Splendor in the Grass. Yeah, it worked out really well.
where did you end up shooting?
LA,
In
East
LA,
Side.
in
Yeah.
and around LA. Of course,
Yeah.
so many different locations there. Now, going through some of your films, I noticed a few that I wanted to highlight. The Ryan White story.
That's the movie. I'm looking so I don't have my head down, but I want to look at you now and then. But the Ryan White story was the most profound movie and the most profound experience I've had in filmmaking in all the films I've done. Why? Because Ryan, they had a script written, and then ABC came to me and said, "We want to do this movie, and it's about Ryan White, and he's very unhappy with this draft." So I flew out to see him in Kokomo, Indiana, and here he was, 17 years old, and he looked at me and he said, "Mr. Herzfeld," I said, "John." He said, "John, I really want this movie to be right, and because when you're when this finally comes on TV, I'll probably be dead." Now, those are profound words to have a 17-year-old young man tell you. So I wrote the script. I went over every single line with him. I wanted to tell it exactly the way it was. And the circumstances of filming the movie, it was a big movie for ABC. George C. Scott, it was big for him to do a television movie. And George C. Scott, I know that you had mentioned in one of your podcasts, you had interviewed Robert Walden for a movie he did with George C. Scott called The Hospital, right?
One of my all-time favorite movies.
Okay, well, next time you look at The Hospital, if you look at the opening where George C. Scott is leading all the young doctors around, you'll see one guy following him around with hair down here as an extra, had no lines, but I worked on Hospital as an extra, pretty much all in the front. And I was watching George C. Scott and I'd watch him act, and I said to myself, I want to direct him one day. One day I want to look through a viewfinder and see George C. Scott. And of course, he was in the Ryan White story. And that was, here I am as an extra there. And there I was directing George C. Scott, which was a great and very interesting experience. And you want to hear a movie story?
I'd love to hear a movie story.
Okay, so we are down in South Carolina. Now, this is again a movie about a young man who had AIDS, right? Who got it through a blood transfusion, and his life fell apart. They didn't allow him in school. Everybody was afraid you could catch AIDS, and from being close to someone. And I had George C. Scott, and we started out filming the scene where George C. Scott drives up with Judith Light, who was wonderful in the movie, and Lucas Haas, who had just done Witness, who's playing Ryan White. And, I wanted to do one cool shot with a truck coming down. He gets out, he's swarmed by reporters asking him a million questions, and he and Judith Light and Ryan White go up the steps into the courthouse. So I did a steady cam on a crane that comes off the crane, follows George C. Scott. He getting us all one shot. Now I have, since this is the first day, all the ABC executives. I have the producers. very important producers at the time, and it's very, very hot. And George was, I didn't know him. He was a little tense. I think he had been in rehab. So this was one of his first movies coming out, and Trish Van Devere was with him. And I got to like the 10th take, which you don't do in television, but I really wanted to do a cool shot. So on the 10th take, just something kept going wrong. And the assistant director came out and said, George is done. So what do you mean? He goes, he's finished. You don't do these shots in TV. These TV is a close-up medium. You're doing these shots, and then all these executives swarm around. What's going on? So I walked in, and George C. Scott he's got his face to the air conditioner, blowing, and I walk up to his back, and I said, Mr. Scott, I'm sorry. I know when to get it right. I've talked to the crew. We worked it out. I'm sorry. I want to do one shot. And he said, I'm done. And he doesn't turn around. And I'm looking at his back. And I said, Mr. Scott, I'm going to get it. It's going to be perfect. There's all one more take, please. It's a great shot. I'm 100% going to get it right. I'm just going to ask you for one more. And he turns around and he looks down at me because he's a tall guy. And he said, no means no. Do you want me to get ugly? Never forget that line.
Wow.
And he turns back around. And I said, I'm going to get everybody on their marks. Everybody's going to be ready to go. It's going to be perfect. I'm sorry it took this long. It's going to be a perfect shot. I give you my word. I walk out. I announce to the crew, I said, I don't want to bump. If anyone makes a mistake, they're on the plane. They're out of here now. Do you understand? You're fired if you make a mistake, but you're not going to make a mistake. It's going to be perfect. Steadicam's going to be perfect. Crane's going to be perfect. All the extras are going to be perfect. I made this announcement. All the ABC executives said, he's not coming out. I said, get on your marks. Get the truck back. Get it ready. Let's go. Get everybody in their places. Now, I'm basically bluffing, but in my heart of hearts, I just felt this has got to work. He comes out. He walks to the truck. He gets in the truck. We do it as flawless. I say, cut, was it perfect? They're really loud. They go, it's perfect. It's perfect. It's the one in the movie. And he literally goes into the courthouse, out the back, into his wife's car, and he's gone. Now, the next day, I don't see him. Next day, we're doing a scene in the court where he gives a bit of a monologue. And I rehearsed it over and over with all the stand-ins, come down to George, he starts, go off him, go over, and all the different characters. And he looks at me like, what are you doing? You're doing another one shot, And I said, Mr. Scott, I've rehearsed this over and over. The shot will be perfect. It's going to be perfect. Okay. He does it. One take. We got it. Cut. Print. Next location. One take. And I don't see him. And I see him out of the corner of my eye as we're setting up the next shot, which is just two over, him sitting down, talking to Judith Light and Lucas Haas. And see, out of the corner of my eye, I see him over at the monitor. And I guess he was asking for a playback of yesterday's shot, right? He asked the guy to play back and see what yesterday's shot was. And I see him watching. And then I guess he asked him to play the shot we just did, which was one take. Didn't say anything. Sit down. We do the next one. It's two over shots. It's, close, medium. We're done. And I say, okay, we got it. And he walks behind me and he goes, yesterday, which he whispers, good shot to me in my ear. Doesn't say anything else. And he says, okay. It went flawless for the rest of the time. We had a great time together. And
I give you a lot of credit for going eyeball to eyeball with him. It's talk about pressure. First day of shooting, all the executives there. I mean, talk about being in a spotlight and having to deal. That's pretty incredible. My one ex I worked on George's last two movies. He came over to Showtime. We did a remake of 12 Angry Men.
Oh my God, please don't.
He played the Lee J. Cobb part.
Wait a minute. You, you know that, excuse me, I hit the thing. You know that 12 Angry Men uh was against me for the DGA award. William Friedkin, who I got to know pretty well, and John Frankenheimer became a very close friend. He invited and we got
Did we beat you guys out? No.
no, I won. I
You
won
won.
I won over Billy Friedkin and John Frankenheimer and I think Charlie Haid. But it was, and Billy Friedkin did something I have never ever ever could imagine in my life. You know how the DGA, when you have the nominees, you sit on the stage and they, the audience asks you questions and each director talks about their work. And so I'm in one of the chairs with the phenomenal John Frankenheimer, who, right, William Friedkin, who made the best cop movie in the history of movies and the best horror movie in the history of movies, Exorcist. And it comes to Friedkin. Well, I didn't know that. I just met, I think once or twice before we got on the stage. And he says, in front of the packed DGA room, because with those big directors, not only did you have the first theater packed, they had the second theater packed, the spillover, right? For the Meet the Nominees thing. And Billy says, look, I know when I've made the best movie because I've done it. I know when I've made the best movie. I did it. I think I've done it twice. And I didn't do it this year. He says, the guy who made the best movie this year on this stage is him. And he points to me, which
Wow.
to this day is still one of the most shocking moments of my life. And he said, this guy made the best movie. This Don King All in the Mirror is the best directed movie this year. It floored me. I don't know what influence that had. I mean, we got great reviews and everything, and the movie won so many awards, but that's William Friedkin. That's William Friedkin, who I went on. We worked together on a movie, and I had dinner with him many times, and I loved him, and he was.
Spending 13 days. We only had 13 days to shoot 12 Angry Men. A little over one day per man. It was an experience. I mean, you're sitting on a couch next to George C. Scott and Jack Lemmon and Hume Cronin and an unknown actor at that time named James Gandolfini, who wondered why I was asking him to do interviews. He was I'm a nobody. What do you want to talk to me for? Anyway, it was an experience. And knowing being a nut about film history and knowing the script to patent, I turned to George at one time and I just said, George, I noticed in your trailer you have a Bible next to your bed. Do you read it often? Without breaking a breaking a note, he says, every goddamn day.
Really?
He was fun. He he was a character. He was a true character. So yeah, this is a great that's a great story. Great story. I want to put up. Let's see. I actually this is another film. This isn't a film that got as good of reviews, but I thought that the fact that you got Travolta and Olivia Newton-John to be in a film post, I think this was post Grease, correct?
Yes.
This
Now,
this is two of a kind. Now this is a bit of a fantasy story. How did this come about?
I wrote the script on spec. The script was called The Light. The script was about God. The script is a little different than the movie that came out, and this is how. And I don't think I've talked about this. The script I wrote was called The Light, and it was same story. Um,
For the viewers who for the viewers who don't know it, give them a capsule of what the story's about.
Stories about that God thinks the world is going awry and he's going to decide that he's going to flood the world and he's very unhappy with what's going on. And, Elvis died and there's Vietnam War and all these terrible things that have happened. And the angels convince him to, well, if we can take two really messed up people and bring them around and they can save themselves, so to speak, and redeem themselves, would that convince you not to flood the world and that mankind is good? Now, that was the light, but also in the script that I wrote and what I originally filmed was that the light, God, was what someone saw themselves saw. Let me be clear. You had four angels. You had Charles Durning, white man, middle age. You had Scatman Crothers, who I loved and became a great friend, a black man. You had Costula Guerra, Spanish man. You had Beast Straight, who actually just won the Academy Award for Network as a woman. And when they looked at this light, they saw somewhat in the image they were, God, if God was, Scatman was looking, God had a certain black look to him. It was white or a female. So that's what I filmed. And the voice of God was Orson Welles. And I spent some few glorious days with Orson Welles, who, when we finished doing it, and Orson and I were sitting around and drinking, we had a glass of wine, he looked at me. I didn't get it at the time. And he said, "Oh, this is the movie, huh? This is going to be, people look and they see this." And it was a little darker than the movie came out. And he said, "Okay, let's see how it goes." I didn't understand what he meant. But what happened was when the studio, when they saw the movie, they thought it would be too controversial. They thought this is too controversial and they're afraid of backlash. And so they said, we're going to change it. We're going to change the heaven scenes. We need you to rewrite them. And of course, then Gene Hackman came in, did a phenomenal job with Gene Hackman, but it was different because my original version was different. I wanted to test it. But they felt, no, word might get out and, we don't want to offend anybody. So now look, do I know more than 20th Century Fox? No, I do not. So I don't know what it would have been different or, if they would have taken shots at me or would have been catastrophic, who knows? But that's my original movie is called The Light. That's what John and Olivia signed up for. And I love what they did. But it was a little bit different with Orson Welles and that dialogue, a little darker, probably like more of my work that followed.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, when you start to deal with religious stuff, studios sometimes freak out. I think
Yeah.
it's a sense that there'll be protests and things like that. Did you have a studio executive that was on your side, or was everybody saying forget it?
Well, the studio executive, the head of the studio who gave the movie a go was Joe Wazan, who
Oh,
was, and Joe, who I did projects with after that and was a good friend till the end, he just said, "John, it's just, they've done research and we can't do this now." So I don't know, I don't know what would have been, but that's what it turned out to be. So it's a little different.
sure, sure. All right, so let's get to 2 days in the valley. Now I got to tell you, I every morning I have my exercise regimen. I hop on my trampoline, I do my elliptical, and I'm always watching a movie. But I have a rule, I have to watch a movie I've never seen before. Otherwise, I'll put The Magnificent Seven and watch it for the 7,000th time. I'll never learn anything about the movie business because I'm watching the same. So the other day I put on, I think what I do is I go through the list of films. I see 2 Days in the Valley, looked at the cast, never seen it. I got to check that out. And I got to tell you, this was a lot of fun for me. Everybody's always quoting Scott Frank's script for Get Shorty, the whole Hollywood and crime thing. But I thought you wrote a really clever crime drama with an incredible cast. Tell me how this project all got started.
Here's how it started. I had uh, I had done a number of television movies. I had done the Ryan White story, the Preppy Murder. I did a movie I'm very proud of called Daddy, which introduced a young actress called Patricia Arquette and Dermot Mulroney. That was their introduction. And of course, Danny Aiello, who I did 5 movies with, who I loved. I miss him dearly. And I wanted to get back into movies. So I I wrote a script for Joe Wazan. And and the script was based on a writer wrote this script who was it was an executive at a advertising firm. I went to see him and I said, I'd love to adapt your book. I love your book. It's phenomenal. And I adapted. I ended up doing like 20 drafts of the script, and we tried to cast it with a million actors. The script was called The Midnight Club.
Hmm.
And for one reason or another, like in Hollywood, you just never get it going. I could never get the right star, but it's about a cop who gets shot that ends up in a wheelchair and goes after the bad guy in a wheelchair. So it's a tough sell. But the writers stuck by me and we kept going, and then
Now
just never.
you're mentioning the original novel that it was based on. That's with the wheelchair guy,
Yeah, the original novel is called The Midnight Club by an unknown writer
right?
who went on to some success. Uh, his name was James Patterson.
Early James Patterson. That's crazy.
It was when I went to see him, he was working at an advertising firm. He said, I want to be a writer. I want to quit this job. So, and anyway, I put everything on hold. I tried to get this movie going endlessly. And then one day, when I was about to have a baby, and one day I just said, after the latest actor passed, I literally took the 20 versions I ever wrote it. I put on the barbecue in my backyard. I put the lighter fluid on it and burned them. And I said, I got to put this behind me and try and move on with my career. And I got so depressed. I got in the car and started driving around, and I ended up passing the Veterans Cemetery on Sepulveda. Don't ask me why, but my father was a veteran, um, pretty much a World War II hero, not buried there, of course. But I started walking around the cemetery and oh, aimlessly, I don't even know what I was doing. And I ended up in front of a tombstone. It said Dosmo Pizzo. What a strange name. I've heard of Roscoe. I never heard of Dosmo. Then a couple of stones down was Lee Woods, died during the Civil War. And I ran to my car because I carried a handheld tape recorder, and I started to dictate. I started thinking, Cosmo Pizzo, a hitman who blew his first hit, and now he's out working the pizza parlor in the valley, and he's escaped from New York, and here's so his skier Teri Hatcher, and she was a skier that always came in fourth. And I said, nobody has achieved what they want, and they're all trying to get there, almost like myself. And I dictated as much as I could until they closed the cemetery. I went back the next day. I went back the next day. I went back maybe 4 days in a row. And I just walked around taking names off Tombstone and talking as fast as I could. And at the end of, I think, 4 days, and I had it transcribed, and this will never happen to me again, nor did it ever happen to me again. I never changed a word. What I dictated is the movie. And as a matter of fact, we rehearsed the movie for a couple of weeks, every scene. And when we started to shoot it, I basically said to James in one scene, you want to try something different? You want to do something? And James turned to me and he said, John, we are all here because of this script.
And
We've all signed on.
you're talking about James Spader.
James Spader, because we were with Charlize, who, this is her first movie. She never acted before. She walked in, she never said a line in the movie, but I'll tell you about that in a minute. But so James said, don't fuck this up. Don't change it. Don't improvise. Let's do this movie. And there's no
By the,
improvisation. What we filmed is the movie. Now, it's never happened before. It's never happened before or ever after all these years later.
by the way, perfect casting, James Spader. Talk about Mr. Ice. There isn't an ounce of warmth in his character, and I've worked with James Spader. I actually after I did Porky's 2, I was the publicist on Pretty in Pink. So I worked with Andrew McCarthy and Spader and obviously Molly Ringwald. But Spader, yeah, he plays the ice very well. But let's talk a little bit about the cast because I thought your cast was just flawless. I mean,
Thank
it's
you.
it's a movie where these kinds of movies are very much dependent on who you get to play. And Danny Aiello, to start with, there's more character in his face than some 10 actors. And did you know Danny at that time, or was he new to your world?
No, I had met Danny. My first thing I directed was an after school special. Do you remember what they were? After school specials were little
Yes, sure.
morality dramas, an hour long. The kids would get home from school and watch. And I luckily was it was nominated for an Emmy. I was nominated for directing and writing and the best. And they liked it so much, ABC, that they decided not to show it in the afternoon, and they showed it Sunday night on ABC at 8 o'clock at night. So it
Oh my
became
goodness.
much bigger. Could you imagine being a Sunday night? They're showing an after school special instead of 3:30 in the afternoon. And anyway, when I was at the Emmy ceremony in New York, um, I saw, I didn't know anybody. I'm going to table all these people. So I got up and I walked to the back and I'm just hanging out. And there's Danny, and he's hanging out too in the doorway. And he says, "So you know anybody here?" And I go, "No." I go, "Neither do I." He was nominated for an after school special too. And we just hit it off. We just hit it off. He's from New York, but lived in New Jersey in Saddle River. Coincidentally, he ended up living one door down from my mother in Saddle River. And so then the first movie we did was Daddy. He played the coach with Patricia Arquette and Dermot Mulroney. And we had a great time. And then he played in the Preppy Murder. He played Mike Sheehan. You remember Robert Chambers, the guy that strangled the girl in Central Park? And Danny played Mike Sheehan, the real detective who arrested Chambers. And he was great. So that was the second thing we did. 2 Days in the Valley was the third thing we did. So that was the third movie we did together. And Danny was I loved Danny.
When
Danny and I
you
would talk.
when you work with characters of that dimension, character actors who just bring so much character to the set every day, is it easier for you than working with the neophytes? I would think so. I would think that they come in with so good baggage, right?
Yeah, no, I don't think
No?
it's any different. On that movie was unique because of the casting of Charlize. Now, I had all these great actors, all these veterans, James Spader, Jeff Daniels, Eric Stoltz, Teri Hatcher, Marsha Mason, Academy Award winner, Keith Carradine. I had the phenomenal Oliver Wood shooting it, and Charlize was the only one who'd never acted before. So, it was I had a little problem in that we rehearsed for 2 weeks. We all knew it great. But when we did the read through, all the actors came in and we read the script, after we rehearsed, so we had everything down. Danny, he's he did it full throttle. Danny did it full throttle, and Eric gave his best, and James Spader, everybody, Jeff Daniels, and Charlize was very quiet. She was, reading a little quiet because surrounded by all these people. And one of the executives got very nervous after the read through and said, he hadn't been at the rehearsals, and suddenly I had a couple of people calling saying, "We don't know, we don't know. Maybe you want to replace her." Uh, this She's the linchpin of the movie. She turns the movie. And what if it doesn't work out? You're going to sink this movie. I go, no, no. She's going to be great. When the camera goes on, she's going to be phenomenal. As a matter of fact, she's going to be a huge star. And then I had one of the actors' agents call me and say they're out. What do you mean they're out? And they don't think they think this girl you cast, I know you like her, and but I think you got to replace her, and started suggesting replacements. And then I got another call, and I said, no, I'm not going to do it. I refuse. She's going to be great. She's going to be phenomenal. I've rehearsed with her. She's trust me. But and I stuck to my guns and put on because of the cast, I had to shoot the movie backwards. Because you had so many cast members, in order to get their schedule, I had to literally start with the ending. So Charlize's very first scene in the movie, her very first time on screen, was dying when she staggers up, Lee, Lee, and she's shot and bleeding and staggers up there at the end. That was her first scene.
Oh my
And
God.
and it was horrible to do, but it was the only way I could keep all these actors in it who, weren't making a fortune for doing it. It's kind of a favored nation thing. So um, I had a lot of executives there. I mean, suddenly by the monitors, surrounded by executives who were watching and seeing how it's going to go. And but of course, she came through with flying colors. And I actually said I said, I said, after this movie comes out, she is going to be huge. She'll never stop working. She'll never stop working. And I think I showed some of the film. I don't know, I don't know. I think Tom Hanks saw because he cast her in The Things You Do Next, the movie that he directed, which she was, of course, great in too. And she's great.
I mean,
And
she's stunningly beautiful. I
stunningly.
mean, she doesn't have to open her mouth and you're mesmerized.
No, and you know what I'm very proud of too? The fight scene between her and Teri Hatcher on the Rotten Tomatoes best fight scenes in cinema were 17. They ranked the best fight scenes in the history of cinema. It's every great fight scene you could think of, and we're the only one with women. All the other fight scenes are men.
Interesting. Interesting.
So I was very happy with that, and we, built that motel room, and that was one of the only two sets that we built, and anyway, it worked out. It worked out great. And the way that fight scene came out was when we started to do it. It starts out with Teri punching Charlize, but
Right.
accidentally connected. Boom, cut, whatever, black and blue. Charlize, you all right? No, I'm fine. I'm fine. Just buy me a beer when it's over. I'm fine. Put the makeup on, covered it up. But now they're really amped up. Should we get the stunt girls? No, no, no. We don't need stunts. And so most of that is them. Most of that is them. And I think it worked out because everything got lifted up once Charlize got clipped.
That's great. Now, I wanted to bring up a shot of early in the film with Eric Stoltz, with this Asian actress who plays the massage person. I thought there was something very charming about her, very sweet, and
She's
obviously really a nice scene, a different temper, different tenor than a lot of the other pictures. And Stoltz, his character seems to not want to raid this massage parlor, and it kind of propels him to the whole movie.
exactly. And Kathleen Long was her name. And she was wonderful. She was new too. I don't know. I don't think she'd acted before either. She passed away sadly um, several years ago, but she was
Oh,
great. And Eric was wonderful. Eric was wonderful. I think Eric's agent had come by when we were filming her. One of his agents said, Eric, you want to do this really with this thing? You get aroused, and they were a little concerned about the scene. He was, of course, completely on board, and he goes, "No, forget it. Let me pick out the size I want and all that." And Eric was terrific. Eric stayed in costume the entire time. He wore his costume the entire time, and he did something I don't think I've seen that often. He came to all the dailies, and even when he was finished with the movie and wrapped, he came to the dailies every day to see the rest of everybody else's work. And he was just so great to work with, and he was so positive and so supportive and passionate, and he was a great guy. I haven't seen him in years and years, but he was wonderful. I love working
Yeah,
with
and
him.
he's interesting. He plays a cop, and they're doing this undercover work in the what do they call it? The Vice Squad. Vice Squad, and he's partnered with a very different type of Jeff Daniels. Jeff Daniels doesn't play dark very often, but he's very dark in this.
I said, Jeff, you're a cowboy, you're a gunslinger. That's why he had the boots and the long hair, and Jeff was wonderful to work with too. Everybody was. It was just it was a great experience. Yeah, and Jeff really went for it, and I thought his scenes with Eric were great. And there you go. And there's Paul Mazursky.
Now, that was I wanted to ask you about Paul Mazursky because Paul Mazursky essentially at the very beginning of the film, you see him wandering through the ceremony to, I guess, to visit. Is it his dad's grave? I think it is his dad's grave. Is it?
Uh
I'm trying to remember if it's
yeah. He of course he went there to commit suicide.
right.
He
Right.
went, he's a guy who was basically on his back in movie jail, thought his career was over. Remember, he dropped his Emmy in the garbage can. So,
Right.
there's a little of me in there too. Two of a Kind wasn't a huge hit. And so there's a little of me in there. And I thought Paul was wonderful. I thought Marsha Mason, his whole relationship was wonderful. And I loved how he worked with Danny. And of course, they did the pickle together. Paul had directed Danny in the pickle, and the phenomenal, the great. I mean,
Oh, she
Glenn
was wonderful.
Glenn Headley was. I mean, you look at that performance, and it is. I think it's magical. She was magical, magical. And I also just want to shout out the production design. I thought was great, and it was Catherine Hardwicke, who Catherine Hardwicke is the director now.
Right. Right.
She was my production designer, and she did a great job with all that artwork and all those paintings, and so she was great to work with. And when we did the 25th anniversary screening, Charlize came, and Catherine Hardwicke came, and everybody who was around in the cast came. So that was really cool.
Yeah, Charlize seems to be one of those actors who doesn't age. She looks just as good on anything she does as she. I mean, I'm watching her in a movie that's a few years old now. It's let's see, 5 and 25. It's 4 and 30, 20, 25 years old. 20. Yeah, oh, so you must have just recently had the anniversary of it.
Yeah, maybe it was the 20th anniversary. I think
Oh,
the 20th.
20th. Okay.
It was a few years ago. We had it in Hollywood, and it was packed. I think there was hundreds of people showed up, and it was really terrific. And Charlize was there, and then we did we talked about it. I had Charlize on stage, and Glenn Headley, and Catherine Hardwicke, and a bunch of the cast. And then Danny called in from New Jersey. He was in filming something in Jersey, and
Now,
yeah,
did
Charlize.
you know John? Did you know Mazursky before you cast him?
No, he came in, and he was it, and that was it. I had a number of great actors who read, and I thought Paul. I mean, come on, he's Paul
Well, is
Mazursky.
is it a bit odd for a working film director to suddenly be auditioning for you? Or I mean, how does that happen?
He liked the role.
He liked the role. Okay.
He liked the script. He liked the script, and I mean, he's Paul Mazursky, and he liked it, and he was wonderful to work with, and he took direction. He was terrific, and
I'm
I guess
sure.
got to know him and hang out with him, and he was great with Danny, and he was a great guy.
Oh yeah, no, and he's and had a lot of acting experience as well. It wasn't like it was his first rodeo.
No, 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 no. He'd done everything. Paul, and he was an actor's director.
Right.
Paul was an actor's director, and he really you just had to say a couple of words, and he got it, and he was, so much talent in that movie. There's just so much talent. I was just so lucky to be surrounded. And I was living in the valley. So when I wrote the script, I basically the location scout, I think lasted an afternoon because I said, let's go here. Can you get that house by the golf? Can you get that here? Can you get this house? I wrote it here on Mulholland. I literally say, this is what I want on Mulholland. I literally went to the spot and I said, this is what, so I knew everywhere I wanted to go because, you know, here I am, have living in the valley. So, yeah, I was very prepared and, I knew the look of the movie. I knew I wanted a watercolor look. And, I actually was inspired by, his name is, I think, Walter Payzant, who was a watercolorist who helped design the original cells of Beauty and the Beast and Dumbo and Bambi for Disney. But he was also a watercolorist and painted this. And I literally said to Oliver Wood, this is the look I want. I want this watercolor look. I want it widescreen so we can get a lot of characters on screen at the same time,
Did you, when the film was finished, did you get some? Now, which company released this film? Which was the
MGM.
MGM release? Did you get some support from them? Did they back the movie? Did they?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Mike Marcus was the head of MGM then, and he was a great guy. And I knew him. He was actually my agent years before, and he was terrific and very supportive. And when we had the little bump in the road where some people weren't sure of Charlize, he backed me. Said, "You think so, John? I'm behind you."
Oh,
So
good.
yes, MGM was they were great. They were
No,
great.
that's great. And for those of you who have not
I
seen,
did my first movie with MGM. The first movie I wrote was Voices with Michael Onkeen and Amy Irving, and we filmed in New Jersey, so that was also MGM.
very good. Well, for those of you guys who have not seen 2 Days in the Valley, it's streaming somewhere, I guarantee you. Go find it because
On
it is.
Amazon.
Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's fun. It's fun. And this is my biggest complaint about movies today. We don't have as many fun movies as we used to have. I find movies are either obviously the franchise movies have run amok, but the movies have gotten, excuse me for expressing my own opinion, I find that movies have gotten too serious. There's just there are topics, of course, that have to be serious, but I feel that I go back to the movies that are just fun characters in a situation that keeps you riveted. And I don't think we have enough of those anymore.
Of course we don't. We don't. If it were me and I would go and somebody would make me a power in Hollywood, I would say every single studio has to produce 2 movies a year that aren't, there's no cape, there's no tights, you have to have, you have to make 2 movies between 10 and $15 million, and you must release them to get back to movies like the movies I grew up in, the movies you'd go see double and triple bills with, not just have everything be the gigantic movie. You've got to take some risk to get some reward. And yes, I'm with you 100%. I find myself, I watch a movie every single night. Every night I watch a movie before I go to sleep.
What did you watch last night?
I Ninth Gate,
Oh, okay.
Johnny Depp, Roman Polanski, uh, which is a terrific, underrated movie. Very strange film, great score.
Oh,
Ninth Gate with Johnny Depp. But and I watch a lot of foreign films. I watch
I,
movies all the time.
I am not a foreign film watcher, but in my efforts to educate myself, I watched my first Fellini film last week. I watched Eight and a Half. And I now understand what a Fellini film is because I'm always referring to it as a Fellini-esque quality, but I've never seen a Fellini film. There must have been 10,000 faces in this movie. I mean, there are people coming out of the drawers practically.
Can I recommend, excuse me, can I recommend a foreign film to you
Please.
that I guarantee that probably no one has seen that which to me is one of the greatest foreign films ever made, containing one of the greatest comedic performances in the history of cinema, as far as I'm concerned, ranks right up there with Chaplin and Gold Rush and Buster Keaton. It's a movie called Bread and Chocolate from 1974, starring Nino Manfredi. It is actually one of the movies that inspired me for 2 Days in the Valley, because it's a movie that 1 minute is unbelievably funny, and the next minute it will rip your heart out. It has great pathos, it has great heart, it has amazing guts, and it's the greatest movie ever made about immigration.
Oh,
It's
wow.
about, it's about an Italian waiter that goes to Switzerland, that tries to blend in to make enough money as a waiter so he can bring his family from Italy to Switzerland. But of course, the Swiss look down at him. He's like an Italian, he's a Goomba, and but he's fighting for his waiter's job. And his performance is absolutely sensational. No one's seen this movie. It's called Bread and Chocolate. It's hard to get. I think you'll have to get the DVD. It's not streaming anywhere. I watch it every year and I love it. Bread
Oh,
and
I will.
and
I've made a note of it. Now, before we go, I want to.
heart and soul.
I will do that. Before we go, I want to mention the movie that brought you quite a few honors, which is, hang on one second, which is the Don King movie, and with Ving Rhames. How did you come into this project? This turned out to be a nice project for you.
HBO was a fan of 2 Days in the Valley, and this movie. So they brought me in, and here's how this movie started for me. I read the script and I thought the script was really good. But there's no boxing in it. But let me get to that in a minute. So I agreed to do the movie, and we're getting ready. We're going to do some casting on the movie. Ving was attached, and I had an office in Studio City, and my assistant said, "There's somebody on the phone for you." I said, who's on the phone? They go, Don King. So I pick up the phone. I think it's Don King, and I hear, John Herzfeld, I heard you had integrity. I heard you were a man of integrity, but obviously you have none. And I realize it does sound like Don. Who is this? It's Don King, motherfucker. Let me ask you a question. I said, what if someone making a movie about you, and they wrote a script about you, and you're alive and you're in Las Vegas, and no one ever interviewed you, and they wrote the script? Do you understand what this is? This is HBO's revenge on me for taking Tyson to Showtime, because HBO had all of Don King's fight and they moved into Showtime. So this is a revenge movie, motherfucker. And if you really want to know the real story of Don King, you come and see me and I'll tell you the real story instead of this bullshit in this script. So I called HBO and I go, don't you dare go near Don King. He's going to sue us. Don't go near him. Do not go near him, because he will sue us. We know he's going to sue us, and we don't want that. So I'm thinking, wow, he's right. No one interviewed him. And what if I'm making a movie about me and I'm pretty close and they didn't want to never come talk to me? So I called Ving. I said, Ving, I'm thinking of going to see Don King. He goes, do it. I'll support anything you want to do. Yeah, do it. So I go to see Don King, and Don King takes out a roll. I want actually one of the fight scene. He takes out the largest roll I've ever seen of hundreds and 500s, and he goes, "What are they paying you?" I said, "What's the difference?" He says, "Because I'll pay you twice as much right now in cash." How much are they paying you to do the movie? You want to do the real Don King story? And I said, "No, I'm going to do this, but I want to make changes. And I want to talk to you." And we started talking, and then later we continued the relationship. And I said, "I'm going to do this, but I need to ask you something." He goes, "I never killed that guy. That guy, they say I stomped to death." I said, "Wait a minute, but you did time. You were convicted, and you did time for stomping that guy and kicking him." And he goes, "Well, that's bullshit. It's also bullshit that I bribed Muhammad Ali for $50,000. I said, "But that's a matter of record. I've read about it in Sports Illustrated and Time. I read about it in 100 places that you did give him $50,000 to drop his lawsuit against you because you didn't pay him. And he said, that's bullshit. So what I started to do was I started to call everybody I could who was really involved in his life. For example, in the movie, the cop that arrested him is the cop that arrested him. I literally flew him out from Illinois and he played himself. But then serendipity opened up. I'm in Vegas and I'm starting to meet some people because I wanted to know the truth and, I didn't wanted to do it right. And I run into Chris Christopherson. Chris Christopherson, the singer, great Chris
Sure.
Christopherson. And I'm talking to him and he goes, you want to meet Ali? I said, well, yeah. He said, come with me. And we went into the kitchen of Caesar's Palace where Muhammad Ali had a table set up and they were serving him dinner and he was with his daughter, Layla, and some other people. And we sat and Chris says, this is John Herzfeld. He's doing a Don King story. And Don King. And I said, after we talked a little bit, and he said, who are you? Well, I said, I did this movie called 2 Days in the Valley. And his daughter goes, Dad, this is the movie I told you to see. This is the movie that I saw and I looked. Where's the waiter? Get the waiter over here. And she brings the waiter and says, what movie did you just hear me tell my father he should see? And the waiter says, 2 Days in the Valley. And
Boy,
so
talk about timing.
I said, I said, Don, I said, Mr. Ali, Don says he never uh, bribed you with $50,000 to drop the lawsuit. He said, at that time he kind of go to sleep for a couple of minutes. I don't know what the disease he had where he kind of almost nod out from it and come back, toward the later years. But he said, well, there are three men in the room. There was Jeremiah Shabazz, there's a notary, and there was Muhammad Ali, because Jeremiah Shabazz delivered the money. The notary was there to make sure it was, notarized, this meeting. And so I literally contacted Jeremiah Shabazz, who worked for them. I tried to find him, and he was in a Philadelphia hospital dying of cancer. And I said, I'd like to record a phone call with you, and you tell me exactly what happened, because Don says he didn't do that. And I'd like it because I knew I'd have to annotate everything I did for HBO to legally sign off it. So he said, $1,000. I'm dying. Get me the money overnight. So I called HBO and don't. We're not giving a penny. No, you do it from record. But I thought, no, I want to do it right. I want to do it the way it was. So I called him back. I said, I'll send you 500. He goes, okay, send it to me tonight. So I sent him, we got the money the next day. I had him describe the exact scene word for word. He passed away the next day.
Wow.
But that's the way I did the movie. I talked to everyone. I talked to almost everyone involved.
And and HBO was cool with you doing all of this, even though they're
HBO was wonderful. It was a unique experience, that movie, because HBO, well, first of all, when I was presented the script, there was no boxing in the movie. And I said, but you can't do a movie without boxing, because you can't do Don King without the Thriller in Manila and the Rumble in the Jungle. You've got to do these, you can't have it. But the executive producer felt, no, there can't be boxing. You won't do it right. It'll be terrible. The sports writers will rip you a new asshole, so to speak. And I don't want it in. And I'm at this meeting with the head of HBO and everyone else. And
well, wouldn't you be, John, wouldn't you be able to incorporate documentary footage in those boxing matches? Would that have worked?
that was what was suggested. But I thought to myself, and that's what was suggested. And I thought, wait a minute, I'm going to have somebody play Muhammad Ali, then I'm going to cut to Muhammad Ali. Well, how are you ever going to believe the guy playing Muhammad Ali?
Good
You never
point.
will. It'll destroy the integrity of the movie. No, I can't have someone, the real George Foreman, and then a guy playing George Foreman. I can't do that. So I went back, I went out in the hall to think about it, and I brought my AD with him. Great guy named Jamie Freitag, great AD, did a lot of great movies. And I just met him, and he was in the meeting with me. He said, "Sir, what do you really want to do?" I said, "Well, I want to do the boxing." Maybe that's what you should do. And I walked back in the meeting and I said, I want to do the boxing, which the executive producer did not agree with and the writer did not agree with. But I said, I have to do it. I have to do it. So the head of production there said, listen, you have 8 million to make this movie. I don't care what you do. You want to do boxing? You got to cut something. Well, how much is boxing? What's it going to take you? A day, 2 days? Then you got to lose 6 pages and I remember the John Ford story. So I opened the script. And I took in the middle and I went and put out 6 pages and I said, okay. And that's what happened. And what was unique about the movie was, which turned out really great, and Bing was great, and everybody, Bondi Curtis, all great, was the executive producer loathed the movie. He wasn't. He was in Canada on another project, so he wasn't around when we filmed. But I have messages on my phone. You're making this funny. This is not a funny story. This is a terrible human being. I said, he's not that terrible. And you're doing all this stuff, this motherfucker scene and this and that. And he literally did not like the movie. And the writer abhorred the movie. And when I did a cut and finished the movie, and they did a test, and then we went in the next day, HBO tested it, and I got the night before 4 pages of 78 bullet points of 78 cuts, cut this, cut that, most of the fights cut, cut all the scenes that were really, cut all the stuff with him on looking in the camera, in the ring. And we went point by point. And HBO, which is why HBO makes so many great, phenomenal, brilliant movies, is because, and they basically said, John, we tested the movie, tested great, and we love it. And which of these points do you want to do out of 78? I said, none, unless you want it. And they said, no, we don't. And they stuck with me. And so
Yeah.
HBO backed me. And, the writer, well, I've never heard from him again, never seen, except I saw him at.
By the way, when you were doing all of this research by contacting the actual people, were you feeding all of this information to the writer to incorporate into the script? Was that the plan?
No, no, he didn't want to do any rewrites. No, he didn't agree with the humor I was bringing. So, I did some uncredited work on it, and I made changes on it. But he literally said, when we screened the movie at Paramount, it went over great. And then the reviews hit, which were phenomenal. I mean, the kind of reviews, you don't get. And I remember, because he actually said the movie's a piece of shit. Kind of hurts you because it's an unusual circumstance. I was very proud of the movie. I loved it. Ving loved it. HBO, all the executives loved it. I did more movies with him. I made a deal with him to do more movies. And but he ended up winning the Emmy. The executive producer won the Emmy. He won the Peabody Award, won the Writers Guild Award. I won the Directors Guild Award, won all these, it was a wonderful thing. But what was unusual, because I never had that happen before or after, they didn't like the movie, but Bing and I got along great. Bing was unbelievably supportive. I mean, I'm sorry I haven't worked him again. I'd love to find an opportunity, but we got along famously, and he was.
Well, that's a great
Do
story.
you remember what he did at the Golden Globes?
What?
Ving Rhames won the Golden Globe for his performance. I don't know if you remember this, but he got up and said, I want to give this Golden Globe to the man that inspired me and has inspired my career and everything I've done. Jack Lemmon, would you come up? And Jack Lemmon's going, what? And he comes and Bing Rain gives him his Golden Globe. If you look at it, he gave him his Golden Globe. And the next morning, my phone rings and it's Jack Lemmon. And Jack Lemmon says to me, why did Ving give me this award? And I said, I don't know. I guess you inspired him and he loves your work and he gave you the award. And he said, well, what do I say to him? I said, I don't know. Thank you. I said, what an honor. And yeah, he gave Jack Lemmon his Golden Globe.
I think I remember that absolutely. Well, this has been fabulous, John. We have been having a very animated chat with John Herzfeld, the director of so many great movies, many of which we've discussed today. If you haven't seen 2 Days in the Valley or the Don King story, go find it, or the Ryan White story. Uh, these are great additions to pop culture. Um, I'm your host. You've been listening to and watching Saturday Night at the Movies. I'm your host, Steve Rubin. Our producer's Ben Shrewsbury. If you're interested in our show, please write us. You can reach me directly at email Steve, STEVEJAY Rubin, RUBIN at Gmail. We also have a second podcast called Tales from Hollywoodland, which I host with two producers, Julian Schlossberg and Arthur E. Friedman. We also have interesting subjects each week on the movies and pop culture itself. John, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. Is there
Thank you.
something, is there something you would like to tout? Is there something that you're doing in your life that you'd like to let the masses know about? Anything particular on the horizon?
I do have something on the horizon of getting close with the movie with a star, but I'm afraid the minute I mention it, it will die. I will jinx it and it will die. We're getting close. I wrote a script. It's kind of like in the vein of 2 Days in the Valley. It's an ensemble. It's kind of a love letter to Hollywood because it's about the movie business. But and I literally thought about it. Should I talk about it? But I know the minute I do, it will die.
Well,
It will
when it
die.
gets made, and I'm send all the positive thoughts I can your way. You'll come back on the show, and we'll talk about that as well. And I may have you come back anyways because you've been a great raconteur.
I want to say one more thing to you.
Yes,
We have one more thing in common. You mentioned Bavaria earlier.
yes.
Okay. Uh, I was in Bavaria. I've been there a few times because, and you mentioned Patton. Patton, um, Patton was the military governor of Bavaria after the war. And I don't know if you know, but he had General Eisenhower had problems with him, and then he removed him from that.
Yeah,
Patton,
he was not doing the getting the Nazis out. He wanted to use the Nazis to run the province.
yes. So Eisenhower took him out of the position of military governor. My father replaced him. My
Really?
father was the military governor in Bavaria, and his job was to denazify it. So he was the military governor from 1945 to 1947. He was the judge, he was the jury. My father was a lawyer before he went in. He was a guy who fought from D-Day through the Hurtgen Forest, through the liberation of Dachau. My father was there at the liberation of Dachau. He helped prepare the Nuremberg trials, and he became military governor in Bavaria. And I spent a lot of time with Helen Patton, who's Patton's granddaughter. So that's a big part of my history. And
Sure. What unit in the Third Army was your dad a member of?
he was in the 83rd Infantry, but he was in intelligence. He was
Oh,
very high level intelligence. I mean, he got Bronze Stars for his night patrols. He was in an elite unit that basically, went behind enemy lines, grabbed somebody. He spoke German and French, and so he would interrogate them too. And so he was everywhere. He was at the when the Germans surrendered in Weir, France, on May 7th. He was there. He was everywhere because he was high level intelligence. And a lot of this I didn't find out till after he passed away because he wouldn't talk about a lot of it because he couldn't talk about a lot of the things he did, but he left me a box with hundreds of little photos that he took.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And so anyway, when you mentioned Bavaria earlier and you mentioned Patton, uh,
Well, my dad was drafted at the age of 42. He was a company clerk attached to the Army in Battle Creek, Michigan. And I always say that my dad helped defend the Kellogg's cornflakes plant. He caught pneumonia and was cashiered out as an honorable discharge after, I don't think he was cashiered out. He was just honorably discharged after 3 months in the Army, but it was quite a story. Thank you so much. I am going to say thank you again and really appreciate it.
thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.